You're watching CNN and this is Connect the World with me, Lynda Kinkade. Welcome back. Well, let's dig a little deeper into one of our top stories this hour. An American-backed alliance of Kurdish forces and Sunni Arabs has launched an offensive against ISIS in an area north of Raqqa, Syria. The ISIS flag has flown over Raqqa for nearly 3 years, and the Sunni extremist group has imposed hardline Islamic law in a city once considered the most liberal in Syria. But the local Arabs don't have much love for the Kurds either. CNN reporters who've worked in the region say the people of Raqqa fear the Kurdish forces will take their land and expel them from their homes. And it's not only Raqqa where we see this kind of tension between local populations and those apparently there to liberate them. We've also seen it in places like Tikrit in Iraq. For more, we're joined now by Fawaz Gerges from London, who recently published this book, ISIS, A History. Fawaz, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Now, the Kurdish Arab alliance of the Syrian Democratic Forces is attempting to retake that area north of Raqqa, the so-called ISIS capital. Just give us a sense of the success that they've had in the past fighting against ISIS.
Well, you know, Lynda, the armed Kurdish groups are the most effective force. Basically, they have proven record in fighting ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria. They are the most fighters that are trusted by the Americans. Remember Kobani. For almost a year, ISIS tried to take over Kobani. They lost 2,000 fighters in Kobani. The Kurds, with the support of the Americans, made sure that Kobani did not fall. I really believe that the ability of the Kurds to hold Kobani and the failure of ISIS to take over Kobani represented a watershed in the fight against ISIS. And the Americans are relying a great deal on the Kurdish forces. You have about 20,000 forces. Sadly, as you said, there is not much trust between the Kurdish forces and the local population. A widespread sentiment exists that the Kurds have their own political project, that they have expanded at the expense of the local population, that basically they would like to establish a separatist autonomous region. So the Americans really find themselves between a rock and a hard place. The Kurdish forces are the most effective fighting forces against ISIS. On the other hand, the local population do not trust the Kurds. That's why the Americans have recruited and trained about 3,000 Arab fighters to join the Kurdish forces, and that's what you said. It's the Syrian Democratic Forces. It's a force made up of 20,000 Kurdish fighters and about 3,000 Arab fighters that are trying to retake Raqqa, which is the nominal capital of ISIS.
Some say for the people in Raqqa, choosing between ISIS or the Kurdish alliance is like choosing between the lesser of two evils. Is that your assessment?
Very sadly so. And that's why if Raqqa falls, either in 5 months or 6 months, for our own viewers, the fight for Raqqa city has not started. You're talking about 50 kilometers. I mean, the forces, the Kurdish forces and the Syrian Democratic Forces. But if and when Raqqa falls, you're going to have an Arab force in charge to replace ISIS. Because if the Kurds remain in Raqqa, this would create major trouble for both the Kurds and the local populations. And that's why both the Kurds and the Americans are fully aware of that. Even the Kurds say, we do not want to replace ISIS in Raqqa because they realize they're not very much liked and trusted by the local population. So what you have now is a joint Arab and Kurdish force. And regardless of what city or town falls, you're going to have the Arab forces replacing ISIS in the towns and villages and the cities that would be liberated in the next weeks or next few months, I hope, around Raqqa.
We've already heard reports from one activist group that ISIS is allowing some civilians in Raqqa to actually flee the city right now. Are you surprised by those claims?
No, I'm not surprised because, Lynda, ISIS is starved financially. And basically, they're imposing a heavy financial burden on any family that leaves. You could leave if you have dollars, hard currency. ISIS would like the hard currency. Another point I want to really make today is that ISIS will fight to the last man in Raqqa. This is an existential fight for ISIS. And again, if history serves as a guide, ISIS will use the local population. You have, more than 200,000 civilians in Raqqa. So they have basically 300,000 captive audiences in Raqqa.
And for those that say the Kurds will use this war to claim or take more territory for themselves, what do you say to them? What do you say to those fears?
Well, first of all, we know that the Kurds would like to have an autonomous region. We know that the Kurds are ambitious. We know that the Kurds believe this is their moment in the sun. So the Kurds have made their objective very clear. They would like to have an autonomous region. I don't think that the Kurds are trying to expand to Raqqa. In fact, in their own defense, the Kurds have made it very clear to the Americans that they do not really want to go to Raqqa. It was the American military and security forces that have convinced the Kurds to go all the way to Raqqa. Just a few days ago, Lynda, the highest, basically, military officer in the U.S. Army went to the Kurdish areas, and my take on it, he convinced the Kurds to play a major role in the liberation of Raqqa, because, again, they are the most effective fighting force. They are fierce fighters. They are trained. They are tried. And the Americans trust them. And that's why they have joined the 3,000 Arab fighters, hopefully to go all the way to Raqqa in the next few months. This is a long, costly, and complex battle. It has just started.
It certainly is long and complex, but Fawaz, Gerges, great to have your analysis for us. Thank you.